Okay, good morning. Good morning, everyone. First order of business, we'll have a call to order and a roll call by the board secretary.
Okay. Chair Smedberg.
Here.
Director Gideby. Vice Chair Goldman. Director Horner. Alternate Director Letourneau.
Here.
Alternate Director Marudian.
Here.
Alternate Director Graham. Here. Director McMillan.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Ellison. Next, we'll have approval of the agenda. And I'd like to move approval of the agenda with the two changes. First, the removal of employee spotlight as the honorees could not be with us today. And two, remove the chair's remarks as he could not be here today. Or the GM, I'm sorry. Yeah. The GM, Mr. Wiedefeld, could not be here today. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. All those in favor? Any opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Thank you very much. Next, we'll move on to the approval of the minutes for the January 16th, 2020 board meeting, for the January 16th, 2020 executive session, the January 23rd, 2020 executive session, the January 29th, 2020 executive session, and the February 13th, 2020 executive session. Are there any questions or comments on that set of minutes? If not, is there a motion? Okay, motion by Ms. Gibbiday. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Next, we'll move on to public comment. Again, there's a timer there. People will have up to 2 minutes. Our first speaker this morning is Michael Bell. Mr. Bell.
Good morning. I'm here again trying to get my workman's comp money and files released to me.
Mr. Bell, could you speak a little louder or into the microphone?
I'm here again today trying to get my workman's comp money and files released to me. Every time I call Mary Fleming, she won't come to the phone. Detective Archer keep hanging up on me. It's been a long, long time. I don't know why they won't release my money and files. So I'm asking the board to please have somebody bring me my money and files, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bell. I think, we've had people reach out in the past, and, I think we've tried to work with you. I mean, the staff has tried to work with you, and thank you for your comments this morning.
No, had nobody try to work with me. Detective Archer gave me his number, but every time I call him, he hangs up on me.
Okay. But we can have someone talk to you in the back of the room. Thank you, Mr. Bell.
It's the same thing over and over. I need my money and my files, sir. That's the law.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
So I'm gonna stand right here until they bring me my money and files. You wanna lock me up, do anything. But enough is enough. I just keep coming back, waiting for y'all to give me my money and files.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Any final comments?
I'm still waiting for my money and files.
Okay.
I've been waiting for some years now. I can't even draw my retirement. I'm 69. I should have been drawing my retirement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Okay. Our next speaker is Ansel Torres, followed by Denise Rush. Ansel. Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell, we have another speaker.
Yeah, there's a gentleman.
I'm waiting for them
Mr.
to
Bell,
give
we have
me my
another
money
speaker.
and files.
Mr. Bell, I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Come on outside, let's talk. I'm the Chief Operating Officer. Let's go outside and talk, okay?
Morning, Ansel, how are you?
Good morning, Chairman Smegberg.
Hold on, well, let's reset the clock.
Can we-
Okay, there we go.
Oh, I was done before I started. Mr. Smegberg, I have so many things to say this morning, and I'm trying to figure out exactly where I start. But one of the first places I want to start is to compliment Mr. Christian Blake for a lot of the work that he's doing at Metro Access. Mr. Blake knows, and a lot of people know, that we don't agree on a lot of things, but I honestly believe he's one of the hardest working men at WMATA and possibly in Washington. However, sir, there are so many issues confronting us today as blind folks that it is somewhat depressing when it comes to WMATA services. We have a situation today where there is a budget that is being considered, but blind people like myself do not have access to the document because it's not accessible. The AAC has been around since 1979, 41 years. And we have a situation where a document as important as the budget, probably the most important document that WMATA will produce in terms of the public, is not accessible for people who are blind. I'm being told that it's not going to be available until March 2nd, which is the last day of comment. That's like sighted folks getting their books at the beginning of the semester, but blind folks have to wait to the last possible day for finals to get the book. That's not fair, it's not right, and it needs to change. I am calling upon you and the general manager at WMATA to give the blind community, the disabled community, an opportunity to meet and speak with you directly about these issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ansel. Denise Rush, followed by Daryl Bauman. Thought I saw Denise. Is she there? Yeah, okay. There she is, okay. Good morning, Denise.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am a member of the AAC committee, but today I'm representing right now the public. I attended the meetings that we've had this week. 2 of them I attended. I have tears in my eyes when I left last night, and as I heard the people begging to not have bus cuts. 20 years ago, I lost my sight, and I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was going to lose my townhouse, didn't have a job, but I heard about Metro Access, and that system saved my life, my quality of life. It saved me. And to hear all those people begging for not having bus cuts reminded me how I felt, and I had tears in my eyes. You should not cut any bus system. You should not cut any buses. You need to make them stronger, because if the people cannot get to the metro, they can't ride the rail. and you cut the buses that people are going to be able to use, they're going to lose their jobs, their whole quality of life. I have Metro access, and I'm fine, but I'm begging you not to cut any of the buses. Add, strengthen them. You are cutting off, you're putting in blood clots in the system of the flow. Please, thank you.
Thanks, Denise. Daryl Bauman, followed by Devin Gardner. Mr. Bauman? Is there Daryl Bauman? Okay, Devin Gardner, followed by Michael Syndrome. Mr. Gardner? Okay. Michael Syndrome, followed by Barbara Millerville. Mr. Syndrome.
Morning, Mr. Chair,
Good morning.
Commissioners. Michael Syndrome, disabled veteran, served our country more than most. Mr. Chair, you have earned my respect. The meeting where public comment was still going on, although my name was not on the list, you took the liberty, exercising your chairmanship, as opposed to anybody else, to be able to have speak. And I appreciate that. Disabled veteran, put my life on the line for due process and fundamental fairness. Let's never forget the reason why we are not ducking grenades, bullets, and mortars, is because we vets have put our life on the line for due process and fundamental fairness. Speaking about public comment, it used to be, Mr. Chair, 2 minutes every 3 months. And I made a lot of noise. I was arrested and everything else. Now we've got 2 minutes per meeting, which is good. Extend that, at least to 3. DC Council does it everywhere else. It should be done here. I have passed up some documents. I want you to peruse them. One was a false arrest, right? I've yet to be made whole. Where's the good chief? I don't see him around here. He's got time to put a phone block on, but he can't be here at the board meeting. Shame on him. He needs to go. Number 2, the phone block issue. That needs to be lifted. Where's Weldefeld? The general manager's not even here? He pulls $1 million, $500,000, and he's not here? Shame. 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 Come on, guys. You know, you can pay top dollar and you don't have to show. Can I get a job here? The money that's due owed me, theft by any other name. The Pavlok is not here. You've got Chief Anzello, who should be the chief. Somebody from Metro Transit should be here in attendance, right? We've got the building for sale. Bad move. Ought not be. It's a good location. Keep it here. You can raise it, and then, you know, build it from the ground up, make it eco-friendly and so on. That's the way to go. And then last but not least, for veterans, not unlike for children riding and so on, for Vet Ride. I brought this to your all attention before, and it seems to fall into your ears. And Ms. Gidgeby, am I pronouncing it right? Yeah, DC representative. I'd like your contact information because you're from DC, as am I, and I want to connect with you direct. So if you can get that to me with John or someone that could pass it up, and then we can communicate more offline. Any questions? I'd be delighted to field them at this time. I'd like to get some answers in writing since I put written documents, Mr. Chair. You know,
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you. Thank you, Michael. All right, next, Barbara Millerville, I think it is, and followed by Bill Orleans, our last speaker.
Hey, would you get the card for the...
Is Barbara here?
Thank you.
Good morning, Barbara.
Good morning.
How are you?
We first met Kathy Hudgens in December of 2012, and I'm the president of the National Capital Citizens with Low Vision, by the way. Kathy was the chair of the Metro Board at that time. Thank you, Kathy, for listening to all 8 of us who came to testify about the romantically lit indoor rail stations and how the inadequate lighting impacts travel for those of us who have partial sight. More importantly, you took action to help us despite Metro faced other important safety challenges. I'm not sure we'd be in the great position we are in today if it were not for you getting the ball rolling for us in the very early stages. It's easy to forget how things were back then and how far indeed we've come. So I've shared a photo from 2012 of the Van Ness station, which demonstrates how dark it was. Emphasis on was. We also commend the current Metro Board for their efforts and hope they will continue the great work with the platform lighting. I live in Fairfax County and personally appreciate Kathy going to bat for me and my fellow residents on Metro matters. It's not always easy to do this with many in Fairfax feeling the need to drive. We miss your smiles and wisdom, but hope you are enjoying your retirement. Well deserved.
Thank you, Barbara. Bill Orleans, and I understand that Mr. Bauman is here, so Mr. Orleans, you're first, and then Mr. Bauman.
Good morning, all.
Good morning.
I could not make the hearing on Monday in Virginia, but from what I understand, most of the 70-plus people who spoke were speaking, defending the retention of the routes they use. Similarly, on Tuesday and yesterday here, Tuesday in Maryland, yesterday here, many of the speakers, many of them spoke about retaining the routes they use. But on Tuesday and last night, some also spoke to a more general desire to have all routes retained because people ride. However, staff determines too few people, but people ride those routes. And in the aggregate, everybody asking for their routes to be retained effectively, I think, suggests that all routes should be retained. And I'm here to make this last case that all routes should be retained. Indeed, all routes and more routes should be created. This fabled transformation project wants to make bus the road of choice. While I have my own disagreements with what some of their final recommendations are, certainly bus should be a reasonable mode available to residents throughout the compact area to get to where they want to go. On Monday and on Tuesday and again last night, I heard many people suggest that this legislative 3% cap is not something that should be honored and adhered to in the future. This board does not have the opportunity to change that unilaterally, but I think this board should report back to their appointing authorities that the cap is unreasonable. Indeed, there ought to be a greater subsidy from each of the three jurisdictions, and I would argue from the fourth as well, to provide more and better transit throughout the Washington region. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orleans. And our last speaker, Daryl Bauman. Daryl, I understand you're here. Yep. Good morning.
Good morning. Okay, I retired from Murray Hotel, and in the morning, I be trying to catch the bus to go see my doctor every morning. Sometimes the bus don't stop for me. It keep on going. I be at the bus stop every morning to go see my doctor. Sometimes the bus don't stop for me. It keep on going. Why?
Yeah, I mean, Mr. Bauman, we could have someone look into that for you. Which route? Yeah, which route? Which route? Do you know the number? Do you know? Yeah.
Oh, the A line. I thought it was like the A2, A6 in Southeast Washington.
You know, we can have Mr. Leader can talk to you about the issue. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Baumann. Okay. Next, we have a report by the Accessibility Advisory Committee. Ms. Rush, Denise.
Good morning again.
Good morning.
I'm Denise Rush, the Vice Chair of the Accessibility Advisory Committee and the Vice Chair of the Metro Access Subcommittee. We had 3 topics at the January meeting. We had a meet and greet, and we met the new board member, Ms. Stephanie. She spent the entire evening with us. We were really pleased. I was really pleased because it's good to have an addition and a woman addition. That night, she was not feeling well. I could hear it. I had not met her, but her voice, she had a really bad cold, and I want to thank you for wading through your not feeling well and staying the entire evening. We got to know you, and you got to know our thoughts of things that were a concern to the AAC committee. So thank you for coming, and we look forward to working with you, and welcome aboard. The next thing that we talked about was the hearings and submitting what we agreed with and disagreed with the proposals. Our main concern is the flat fare, the $2 flat fare, which will mean twice that for the Metro Access, $4. And we're suggesting that you do a 6-month pilot to see how the flat $4 rate would affect the system. And maybe it'll work if you just try it for 6 months, a pilot program. We did not agree with the 25-cent charge for paying for cash. That's targeting people who are on fixed incomes, who can barely get the $4, the $2 to pay, and you want to add 25 cents. We're not agreeing to that. We don't understand that. You help people, you don't hit them when they're already on a fixed income. And we hope that that is reconsidered. We also like the pass, but we don't have a pass for Metro Access. So a pass is being considered, 7-day pass, but we would like to eventually think about a pass for people who ride Metro Access daily and often. We are concerned about the bus cuts because that's affecting handicapped, elderly, and everybody, the entire public. Bus cuts, and especially in PG, but all over, the whole system cutting the buses is a major concern. And last night, there were about 200 people here after working all day, came down to talk about it. The night before I was there, there's 100, quite a few people. I wasn't at the Virginia meeting, but I'm hoping that the board notices that people are concerned. You're talking about their livelihood. In Washington, D.C., they're putting up $1 million condos, and people can't ride the bus to get where they need to be. They're being cut off because they live far out. There's something wrong with that picture, and we've got to figure out how to make it better. All the concerts and ball games and hockey and football and something can make some more money go into what you need to do. But we've got to figure it out. Also, we talked about the new taxi service that we're using for Metro Access because we don't have enough buses to transport the people that we have. We want to make sure that the taxis are accountable on how they treat Metro Access riders. Before we have, well, now we have it so that if a bus is not coming, we are notified that a taxi is coming. But some of the new taxi services, we can't be notified, so we've got to figure out a way to, when I have a taxi coming, I can't see that. So there's not a way for somebody to let me know that it's a taxi. So they're going to have to come to the door, even though they don't come to the door. We're going to have to figure out what works so that it'll be smooth for people to use the service. We don't want to be no-showed because we didn't see the taxi and they just left. But the Abilities Ride system, I have been using it and I'm feeling comfortable, and they are doing it. Some of them are coming to the door and knocking on the door and letting you know they're there and assisting you if you need assistance. But it needs to be done with all the services, with the Uber, with whatever we're using to help people. You know, we have a handicap. We are disabled. It's not a special treatment. We just want to get where we want to go and pay our money. Thank you. That's about all. Any questions?
Thanks, Denise. Well, we missed you Monday night in Virginia. We had
Yeah, I
quite a
couldn't
crowd.
get out there. I don't
We had
know
about
Virginia.
65 speakers. Yeah,
Thank
many
you.
of the same topics.
All right.
Okay. Next, we have a report from the Riders Advisory Council. Mr. Rush. Colin, are you here? No report. Okay. Next will be a report by the chair. So today we will be recognizing one of the longest-serving board members, Virginia board member Kathy Hudgens. Kathy, would you stand and come up here? They always say just stand in place, but come up here, yeah. Oh, get a picture. Just wants a picture first. Oh, keep talking. Oh, okay. I was like, wow. I thought we did the picture last. Okay. All right, and I'll speak loudly. So I want to move the following commendation. Whereas Kathy Hudgens has respectfully represented Fairfax County on the Metro Board of Directors since January 2004, and whereas Mrs. Hudgens, as one of Metro's longest-serving board members, has been an alternate and principal director, and whereas Ms. Hudgens served as chair of the Metro Board of Directors in 2011 and 2012, and whereas chair of the Metro Board and throughout her tenure on the board, Mrs. Hudgens was a strong advocate for regionalism and believed that the region's jurisdictions are stronger when they work together. And whereas under her leadership as chair, the board refined its governance structure, including the adoption of the board's first set of bylaws and code of ethics. And whereas Mrs. Hudgens has also served as chair of several of the board's committees, and whereas as chair of the Customer Service and Operations Committee, Mrs. Hudgens has a strong and consistent voice for Metro consumers, or customers, sorry. And whereas as the chair of the Metro's Finance and Administration Committee, Mrs. Hudgens worked to balance Metro's budget in the face of challenging economic conditions. And whereas the board is grateful for the thoughtful, measured, and collaborative way she approached her service on the board and her willingness to engage in dialogue to seek solutions to issues facing the board. Now therefore be it resolved that the WMATA Board of Directors offers its sincere gratitude to Kathy Hudgens for her service and leadership as a member of the WMATA Board of Directors. And be it further resolved that the WMATA Board of Directors commends Kathy Hudgens for her dedication to providing the best service for WMATA's customers and the region. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, I think it's unanimous. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Obviously not. Good. Kathy, congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much. I'm delighted to be back here. It's been a short time, but it was a joyful time that I did spend during those many years. And I want to commend the board and the community. Metro is the most important thing I think this region has to keep that together as a viable region for the Commonwealth. And it was a joy to be able to serve with so many of you. I'd only say I hope that you can continue the pace in terms of serving our citizens, recognizing the kind of economy that we have in our region, that Metro really is the base of that. When rail came to our district and further into Virginia, we recognized what the impact it has in terms of what the community it serves and builds. So I'm sure each of you are committed to the same, and I want to thank you for your work that you're doing, and good luck. Thank you.
Here we go. You got a nice proclamation. There you go. And yeah, and another piece to add to your collection. Like you and Sharon, you're gonna have to rent a separate apartment for all the awards.
Figure out how to do it. Thank you very much. And
Now Jennifer wants to take her picture. And I just, yeah, and this is for you, John. And I just want to say, ever since I joined NVTC long ago, you were always so welcoming, and I think the thing that struck me when they were putting together this proclamation, the thing that everyone said across the board was how thoughtful and how measured and how collaborative you were, and how much people appreciated that. And I know I did personally, and you were always so welcoming to me, and we really learned a lot from you. I know I certainly did, and I think that approach to matters here really helped the board at a very important time in this organization's history. So you should really be known for that, and I think it really says a lot about you as a person as well, and how I've always known you. So
thank you. I treasure this. This is a very good one. I have a lot of them, but I think
yeah,
the Metro service has really been a fabulous time. Sorry, my throat was.
that's quite right.
But thank you very much, and I just want to wish you all good luck in terms of the work that you have to do.
And Kathy, as kind of the newbie here, yes, but I have also benefited greatly from your guidance. I remember years ago when I first joined the Council of Governments, you were the award winner that year for the Regional Collaborative Award, and I said, I don't know Kathy too well. This is somebody who I should learn to follow and learn your model, and I have, and I've also benefited greatly, and we're very thankful at METC as well for everything you've done for us. Thanks.
Thank you. Good luck to you.
Thank you.
Well, I guess we'll just keep it. Yeah, I guess we're just gonna. I think we're just gonna go ahead and keep this. So our next agenda item today is to welcome a new board appointee, Supervisor Walter Alcorn. Walter. So Walter Alcorn was appointed to the board as an alternate director representing Fairfax County when he began his first term as the Hunter Mill District Supervisor on the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. Walter's focus is on transit-oriented development, pedestrian and bicycle mobility and safety, affordable housing, and diversifying the local economy. Previously, Walter served on the county's planning commission for 16 years and served on the Park Authority Board. Professionally, he has worked on environmental issues in the tech industry and is a nationally recognized expert on electronic recycling systems. Walter is a graduate of the University of Virginia and resides in Reston with his family. And Walter, we want to welcome you to the WMATA board.
Thank you very much, Paul.
And go ahead and do the formal swearing in. So if you would raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Walter Alcorn,
I, Walter Alcorn,
do hereby solemnly swear
do hereby solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
and the Constitution and laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia,
from which I was appointed as an alternate director
from which I was appointed as an alternate director
of the Board of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority,
of the Board of the Washington Metropolitan Area Transit Authority,
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am to enter.
and will faithfully discharge the duties of the office upon which I am to enter.
Thank you. All right, welcome. We look
Just one thing, thank you very much. I look forward to working with all of you. One thing that was not mentioned in my bio, I actually have succeeded Kathy Hudgens on the Board of Supervisors, the 100 mil. So I look forward and hope to be able to continue many of the same traditions that you started, Kathy. So thank you.
Great. Welcome, Walter. Appreciate it. Oh, yes. Yep. Also want to take this opportunity to thank the customers and stakeholders who have participated in our budget public outreach. To date, we've heard from over 8,500 people who have participated in the budget survey. For comparison, we had 5,800 people take that survey last year. This week, over 200 people spoke at our public hearings. No, it's got to be more than that, isn't it? No, 200? Okay. Okay. Still, there's time to make your voice heard. Please check WMATA.com for all the ways to be involved. After the board receives and reviews the public's input, only then will we make any decisions on fares and service. And finally, given the recent news on the coronavirus, I've asked Chief Safety Officer Teresa Empasado to give us and the public an update on what Metro is doing in response to the virus. Teresa?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On January the 29th, Metro activated our pandemic task force in response to the announcement of the novel coronavirus COVID-19. The pandemic task force is an interdisciplinary team comprised of key stakeholders from Metro departments, including safety, operations, occupational health and wellness, emergency management, MTPD, procurement, media relations, employee relations, and customer service. The task force initiated planning in accordance with Phase 1 of Metro's pandemic response plan. Phase 1 of the plan is activated when the World Health Organization or Centers for Disease Control alert the public to a novel strain of a virus or other pathogen that has the ability to pass from person to person. In executing this phase of the plan, Metro has been focused on preparedness. The task force has met weekly since its activation and continues to meet. Metro's current cleaning protocols include disinfecting of equipment and facilities on a regular basis. Metro has verified inventory levels of critical supplies, such as disinfectants and personal protective equipment. Orders were placed by our procurement department in late January to increase supply levels to assure preparedness. In addition to internal coordination and preparation, we've been working with local, state, and federal agencies to keep abreast of the latest efforts to combat disease and assure the health and safety of the region. We've participated in multiple planning activities with health authorities. At this point, there have been no cases of COVID-19 in DC, Virginia, and Maryland. Per the CDC, the current risk of infection to the public in the area is considered low. That being said, good hygiene practices are the most effective method of prevention of any respiratory illness, including COVID-19. Metro has emphasized frequent hand washing, the use of hand sanitizers in the event hand washing facilities are not available, and covering one's cough or sneeze with a tissue, or coughing or sneezing into one's elbow, as well as avoiding touching your face as effective methods to prevent disease. Additionally, disinfecting frequently touched surfaces such as mobile telephones and doorknobs is advised. These seemingly small actions have a big impact in keeping you and your loved ones healthy. Metro is committed to serving the region's transportation needs and will continue to coordinate with health officials and other federal, state, and local partners to assure the health and safety of our customers. We will monitor the situation as it evolves and will provide continuous updates to our employees, our riders, and the general public. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Empisato. That was very informative, and I'm glad our riders now and the public in general will have, a better idea of what Metro is doing to prepare here. And I appreciate your leadership on this as well, preparing the organization for, what could potentially be a serious public health threat. So thank you very much. So that concludes my report. Next, we will move on to a report by the Finance and Capital Committee. I'll turn it over to Mr. McMillan right now. We'll address our first item, approval of the debt management policy. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee considered and approved a debt management policy for WMATA, which complies with requirements in the state of Maryland's dedicated funding legislation. Mr. Chairman, I move approval with the following 3 amendments. In Section 201 of the policy, delete or other special programs such as self-insurance and unfunded pension liability programs. Also in Section 201, delete the phrase as required under Compact Section 33 and replace 50 years with 30 years in referring to the maximum maturity of bonds. And in Section 401, add a second sentence to the first paragraph so that it now reads, the general manager and chief executive officer or his designee may choose between the following 3 different bond sale methods: negotiated, competitive, and private placement. A competitive sale is the preferred method of sale unless market conditions at the time of sale indicate a negotiated or private placement sale will result in lower overall cost to WMATA. In such cases, board approval is required to proceed with a negotiated sale or private placement.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. McMillan? Oh, a second. Yeah, is there a second? Mr.
It's a second, yep. And Secretary Slater asked I read comments into the record. I'd first like to thank WMATA for drafting this debt policy in response to the requirement in Maryland's dedicated capital funding agreements. Establishing a debt policy is a good financial management practice, and it was important to Maryland that WMATA has one in place before embarking on new debt issuance in accordance with the dedicated capital funding agreements. WMATA staff has been very helpful in working with Maryland to make changes to the original draft of the policy in an effort to further strengthen the policy. At the Finance Committee a couple weeks ago, it was a good discussion with regards to that policy. There was one open item that had not been resolved between WMATA staff and Maryland at that meeting. That open item is reflected in this amendment. This amendment establishes a preference for WMATA to do competitive bond sales. Competitive sales allow for open and transparent process and ensure that WMATA gets the best pricing on its bonds. Note that this does not preclude WMATA from doing negotiated sales or private placements. It simply states a preference for competitive sales and requires staff to seek board approval to use an alternative sale method. I recognize that market conditions may sometimes make a competitive sale less advantageous, so we want to make sure we maintain flexibility in the policy. This amendment simply establishes a preference for competitive sales and requires board approval for deviating from that preference. I urge the members to support that amendment.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Graham. Mr. Letourneau.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank Mr. McMillan for his ability and willingness to work with us on the amendments proposed today. In particular, there were concerns in Virginia jurisdictions about language that potentially could have opened the door for the use of debt to fund pension liability, which is not a good financial practice, as well as the length of time from 50 years, which was mentioned in the fiscal policy and is allowed in the compact, but now amended down to 30 years, which is a more typical length of time for debt financing. So we think that those two changes to this are fiscally prudent, and we also support the amendments and the underlying policy.
Okay. Mr. McMillan.
I would just note, and this was discussed in committee, this is a new, dedicated funding has created a new era for WMATA's financial management. This debt policy is a part of that. It's something that will be reviewed and updated each year. So I do want to compliment the staff on surveying best practices at other transit agencies and some of the local jurisdictions here, coming up with a very solid, I think, and responsible first statement of this board's debt policy, and for working with the jurisdictions to make it even better between committee and today. So thank you.
Okay. Any other final questions or comments? If not, we have a motion by Mr. McMillan, seconded by Mr. Graham. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That passes. Next, Mr. McMillan, approval of the joint development agreement for 605th Street Northwest.
Staff sought committee approval to exercise a joint development agreement for Metro's headquarters property located at 600 5th Street Northwest, where we're sitting right now. Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. Any comments or questions? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next, Mr. McMillan, authorization for compact public hearing on changes to parking facilities at New Carrollton Station.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff sought committee authorization for a compact public hearing on the addition of approximately 619 park and ride spaces and the elimination of 77 kiss and ride spaces from the mass transit plan at Metro's New Carrollton Station. This is part of a larger redevelopment that includes some of the realignment of Metro's own facilities, and I think will substantially improve the plan at that location. Mr. Chairman, I move approval.
Great, thank you. Motion by Mr. McMillan, seconded by Mr. Graham. Any questions or comments on this item? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, unanimous. Thank you,
Chairman,
Mr.
that concludes
McMillan.
my report. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Next, we'll move to our consent item, waiver of parking fees during 2020 summer shutdown. I'd like to move approval of the following. Staff requests board approval to waive parking fees at the Vienna and Dunloring metro stations during the summer 2020 platform shutdown. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Letourneau. Any comments or questions on this item? If not, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, that item is approved. And our last order of business is reports, first by the NVTC. I don't think we have a report this afternoon or this morning. DC, Ms. Gividay? No? Okay. Mr. Goldman, WSTC.
Actually, WSTC has a report to bring to the public's attention that the Montgomery County Council's Transportation and Environment Committee will be holding a town hall meeting Monday, March 2nd at 7 p.m. on the WMATA FY 2021 budget. The budget's very controversial, and since the only site for a WMATA hearing was in Prince George's County this year, the County Council has decided on their own initiative to conduct a town hall meeting so that members of the public and riders can give their views on the budget and raise questions just as if they were attending a WMATA hearing. The site of that is the Montgomery Planning Building at 8787 George Avenue in Silver Spring. It's a few blocks north of the Red Line Silver Spring station. I'll be there, and I encourage riders and customers from Montgomery County and nearby sites in the district to journey out and give some statements and testimony about the FY 2020 budget, if they haven't already done so, at the 3 hearings conducted by WMATA this week. Thank you.
What time is it?
7 p.m.
Thank you, Mr. Goldman. Mr. Horner, anything from the federal government?
No, there's not. No.
Okay. If there's no other business, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you. And we'll see you upstairs.